Okay, good morning. I think we're going to get started. Thank you very much for coming this morning. I know we've got a small group. We've heard about some traffic accidents that were happening this morning. So we could have a couple more people trickle in, but if we don't, that's fine. We're just happy to have a good chat with all of you who've come this morning. Let me introduce myself. My name is Erin Tousley, and I'm one of the high school counselors here at ASD, and I work with grades 10 through 12.
I'm Amy Thompson, and I also work with grades 10 through 12, and this is my third year at ASD. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah. Just to give you a brief overview of what we're going to be covering this morning, we do want this to be very discussion-based because we want you to learn from each other, we want you to learn from us, and we would really like to hear some of your insights as parents, as you go through this journey. And just for a show of hands, are any of you elementary parents? Okay, middle school, high school? Okay, I'm actually really happy that we've got a range of divisions here. So one thing we see in our office quite a bit, particularly on the high school side, is a fear of failure from our students, and to the point where it has a lot of negative impacts, both on their physical and mental health. So we're going to take a deeper dive into that today and share some of the things that we're seeing. And part of why we really wanted to have this conversation today was to talk about how, as a school, we can partner with you as parents to teach our students that failure is actually one of the best things that can happen to you in order to grow, and we recognize that, there's a lot of pressure. We're a high-achieving school. Certainly on our end with university stuff, we see a lot of pressure to get into those top institutions, and so how do you get there? But what's interesting for us is, we're comprehensive counselors in the high school, and so we support the social emotional side too. And I think sometimes students and parents forget that we're not just responsible for the university advising and the educational advising. We also care a lot about the student well-being. And we just want to make sure that, they're happy and healthy as they go through these different stages with us and as they work with us in the high school. And it's the same for any of the other divisions as well. So a lot of our focus today is going to be talking about how to empower our students, and help them lose some of that fear of failure. And, Amy and I do want to make something clear this morning, that this morning's discussion is not meant to critique different parenting styles. Everybody has their own way of parenting, and they're all, wonderful in their own way. It's just meant to, really what we want to do today is just look at different styles of parenting, but then also different approaches to things. And like I said, just share some things or observations that we have in the high school. So key takeaways for today, we want to talk about how can you develop more of a growth mindset in your child, if that's something that you're seeing at home. If you're worried about that, let's say your child is really hard on themselves, or they, beat themselves up if they don't get a great result on something, so how can they grow from that? Building confidence through challenges. If we protect our children from challenges and they never learn how to overcome mistakes and work through them, they don't tend to build very much confidence because they've never had to actually work through anything that's difficult. And then real life tips and success stories. So as much as we'll talk about some of the things that we're noticing in the high school, we'll also talk about definitely some positive stories and positive outcomes, that we can share. So this morning is meant to be hopefully insightful. Hopefully you'll walk away with some different thinking points, for your own family and open up some of these conversations with your children at home. Okay.
Okay. I think this is me. Yeah. Okay. So what I really wanted to talk about with this slide is just some of the ways that we do see students or our children failing, and how anxiety might come into play with that, and how anxiety will affect their resilience. So it's not a lot of points on here, but I will talk a lot more about that from my notes. So some of the examples that we see um, when our students come in has a lot to do with academics. They might not have all A's, and I've started saying to my students, B does not stand for bad grade, because they'll come in and they'll say, I have a B in this class, it's so bad. I'm like, no, B is not bad, it's not. So they get really frustrated and, you know, riled up about the fact that they don't have all A's. And then of course that trickles down into their university applications. So they think, okay, I don't have all A's, how's that gonna affect my university applications? I've been told I have to have all A's. I'm not gonna get into good schools, that sort of thing when it comes to academics. That also affects them too when it comes to extracurriculars. So maybe they didn't get put onto a sports team that they tried out for, or the musical that we just had. Maybe they tried out for that and they didn't really get what they wanted, or they didn't get into it at all, right? So those are some of the things that students come to us about, and we try to help them work through that. Now, when it comes to the prevalence of anxiety, the things that I've researched about how anxiety affects resilience is a few things. Social media. Social media, we all know it can be a great tool, but it can also have an effect on them that makes them have a self-worth that might be less. They compare themselves a lot to other people when they're looking at social media, whether that's photos of people who we all know a lot of that is fake, but they do compare themselves in that way. And they also have fear of missing out. Maybe they see their friends on social media, they're at home studying for something, and their friends are all out that weekend and they're doing something fun. So all the research says social media is great. It will help children become more resilient in a way that they can, you know, work through all of these things that they're seeing and feeling, but you must limit it because it will cause anxiety if they are on it too much. Something that I thought was really interesting is that when you are trying to figure out how to help your child feel better about things that maybe they're not great at, get them to help others. I never really had thought about this before, but if you can find opportunities for them to help others, say they want to tutor or they want to do some community service, it gives them a sense of accomplishment, and it makes them feel better, because as we know, altruism, that's what altruism is. You give to others, it makes you feel better, right? So help them find opportunities to help other kids or other people, and the small failures that they might have will kind of dissipate, right? And then it's okay for them to take breaks. So a lot of our students have anxiety because they feel like they can't take breaks. It's not okay to just have unstructured time. So as a parent and as educators, we need to show them an example of it's okay to not have your time structured all the time. You do not have to be studying for something, be in a sport, be in the musical, go outside and you know, have community service going on, take a course through the summer. You must do this and you must do that. We have breaks through the year for a reason. We all need it. The adults need it and the students need it. So making sure that they understand that it's okay to have that unstructured time is very, very important. And then for us as adults, it's really crucial that we show them how to be hopeful for the future, right? How are you going to move forward? But you have to also not minimize the fears that they have about moving forward. Change is good, change is normal. It might not always be what you want, right? But you're hopeful that it will be, and you can make that happen. And we have to role model that for them. So that's a really good thing, I think, as educators and as parents that we need to be doing. But also that fear of future, don't minimize that, because it is scary. They are scared to move forward. They are scared to leave. In fact, this year, the grade 12s, I've had more grade 12s come in and say, oh my gosh, I'm so scared about going away to university. I'm so scared. They've been everywhere in the world. They've traveled all over the place, and yet they're scared to leave and go somewhere new. So I think for us to remind them that that's okay, and there are people that go through that all the time and they still make it through. I think having meaningful conversations with your child as well. not just about school. It can't always be about grades. It can't always be about university. I think just having a sit-down discussion about, you know, I don't know, what are their hopes for the future? Where do they want to go travel to? Is there something that they're really interested in, you know, that they might do once they are out and about in the world? And this can, I know a lot of you have younger children, but starting early, to me, that's one of the most important things, because you can't start in grade 12. It's not too late. They can still change their mindset, but it's more important to start this at an earlier age so that they know how to self-regulate, and they know how to pull themselves up once they've gone through something that wasn't so great, right? And also you telling them stories about yourself, about how maybe you went through something that wasn't so wonderful, or that, you know, there was a setback. Maybe you didn't get the job that you wanted, or maybe you didn't get to go on a trip with your friends that you wanted to, but you know, in the end, it all turned out okay. They need to understand that everything will work out. So we'll move on to helicopter. Let's go back really fast. I just wanted to touch really fast upon what the difference is between a helicopter and a lighthouse parenting mindset. So helicopter parents, who's heard of helicopter parenting? Okay. Helicopter parenting is definitely what they call it is it's the over and over parenting, right? So you're over parenting. You're not allowing your child to do anything on their own. You are fixing a problem before it even is a problem, right? So you are thinking way ahead, what's going to happen, I can stop it from happening, and I can fix it. I'm not going to allow them to fail, I'm just going to make it so it's all okay, right? Lighthouse parenting, that's a new term. Has anybody heard of that? Counselors. So lighthouse parenting is just that. A lighthouse is a structure that guides ships, correct? So they guide them, they show them the way, they tell them that there might be danger somewhere. They tell them that they need to steer clear of things by guiding them. They don't chase the ship down and actually go into the ship and maneuver them around. They just guide. And that's what lighthouse parenting is. So all the research that we did about that, lighthouse parenting is it's not new, it's actually old, and it's coming back. Because we're kind of seeing that helicopter parenting isn't quite the right way or the right fit for everyone, so. Okay.
Well, and last one too is, you know, trusting your child too, right? And that can be hard for us as parents to let go a little bit and trust, you know, that they can figure some things out on their own, you know, and that's difficult because, like Amy was saying, you know, we want to go and fix everything. But that's where, you know, if you use some of the lighthouse parenting strategies and you guide, and I think one of the most important things you can do is just talk to them. Yes. That is absolutely key in helping them to thrive, right? And figure out how to work through these challenges. Okay.
Can I say this quote really fast? Because I found this quote from a doctor who studies this sort of parenting, and he said, it's Dr. Tim Elmore for Every Mom, and he says, a lighthouse stays in one location, and it's a beacon that has ongoing communication with passing ships. A lighthouse reveals its location, it warns mariners of danger, and provides wise guidance, and it won't chase down the ships. So you're the wise guide who is going to help your children. Okay, so what we would like for you to do is think about the scenario and then turn and talk to your neighbor. When your child comes home from school and tells you they were cut from a sports team or they didn't make the musical, think about how do you usually respond? What's the response? Maybe you don't tell them the response, but you think about it in your mind. So think about that. And then how do you move forward after that? How do you support your child in the aftermath? And what are the next steps that you would take? Now, again, what you're thinking in your mind might not be what you say to them, right? But you do something because I'm sure you don't just say, okay, great, just move on. Do you have a conversation with them? Do you tell them, you know what, there are going to be other opportunities in the future. You can try out for other things. Do you just let them vent? Do you try to give them, do you try to say things like, oh, it's not your fault, you're great, that was their loss? Just think about that sort of thing. What do you actually do with your child? And when you think about that, then maybe turn and talk to your neighbor and tell them what you personally do with your children when it comes to this.
Okay. We'll give you about 2 minutes and then we'll come back together.
Okay. Would anyone like to share with the group something that they were talking about?
And don't be embarrassed. Like if you've done something and you're not sure if it was the
Again,
right
no judgment. No judgment.
There's no judgment in this room. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just telling my parents there that my daughter can be a bit secretive, nonchalant. So sometimes it's hard to know if she's hurt or if she's, if she doesn't really care. For instance, I wanted her to volunteer for the festival.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she tried to, but she didn't get in, and she was like, oh well, she's gonna stay at home. I'm like, but I already bought you a ticket, and she's like, no,
yeah.
she doesn't feel like going. So I wasn't sure. Is it that you were hurt, or is it like you don't really care about what she's like? So she's 16, and yeah, she's changed several stages of different emotions. So
Yes.
I find it difficult too, because sometimes I don't want to push her too hard, and at the same time I really need to know what she's thinking,
Yeah.
to know exactly where she is at. Are you hurt? Is there something
Right.
you can do about it, or do you really not care? What exactly do you care about? What do you want us to do about it?
Yeah, and it could be avoidance, and we will bring that up.
Yeah, one of the behaviors.
Avoidance is a behavior that sometimes, they feel like they've failed, so they just avoid doing anything with it. And they just don't want to go, they don't want to be involved, they don't want to, it doesn't matter if it would be super fun to go, they just don't want to have anything to do with it. So avoidance is a huge behavior that we see in our office.
But you're doing a lot of things right.
Yes.
In that you're asking questions, right? And so, you are, because you're asking your daughter, you're asking her to help you understand her response, right? And so instead of just letting it go, having that chat with her is...
Yeah, because her sister is opposite.
Yeah.
She will definitely tell me exactly what happened. This is why I'm hurt, I'm angry
Yeah.
at this, I'm happy, but she just stays silent. So
Yeah.
it can be frustrating at times, because I don't want to push her, but
Yeah.
I really need to know what's going on.
Well, and that's tough too when you have more than one child, because then you're trying to also figure out how they respond differently to different
Yes.
setbacks and respond. So you almost need a map for each one, right, to figure that out. So, but no, you are. I mean,
Yes.
that was a great response.
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody else want to share? Yeah, Rosanna.
Well, I was saying, this made me think of, in dialectical behavior therapy, you work on a skill called distress tolerance, your handling of distress. And I think oftentimes in these situations, the adults have to learn how to handle distressing emotions from their children. And even as a counselor, sometimes I have to remind myself that this is a natural reaction.
Yes.
But I'm uncomfortable with it,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean I have to fix it necessarily.
Exactly.
But just tolerating big emotions can be hard for us as well.
Right, and I would say, as a counselor, and I also coach in the high school, I've seen various responses to different setbacks when it comes to athletics and the arts. And some have been very healthy and some not so healthy, and one of the best things, and if I'm working with a student who, let's say, didn't make a team, I encourage them to go and advocate, and go and talk to the coach and try to understand why they didn't make the final cut, right? So that they can then build from that and work on what it is they need to do to go back out the next year. Sometimes we do deal with situations where we have parents who helicopter and they micromanage and they go behind the scenes and then they'll advocate for their child, which again, depending on the approach, that can be fine. But the child's not involved at all, to actually have a voice in working through the situation. So again, that open communication and the partnership between the parent and the child and the school is really, really important, you know, and if I don't keep a student on a team, I always have good reasons for that, you know, and I'm more than happy to sit down with that student and talk through why, you know, we made that decision, you know, and how they can learn and grow from that. Another parallel, I guess you could draw here too, is what we see with the university applications, you know, and I often tell my seniors, you know, university applications are not that personal. It might feel really personal to you, and when you get a rejection, you might take it like, you know, they didn't want me, but it's anything but that, you know, and that's really difficult to, you know, if a student gets a rejection, how do they move on from that? How do they build from that, you know, and so we often talk about having multiple plans for our students, you know, so that they still feel like they're in the driver's seat of a situation where they actually don't have a lot of control. You know, and it's difficult. It's applying for university is, you know, very vulnerable. You know, you put yourself out there, you're showcasing all the things that are great about you. You know, people are writing about you, and then you wait. You know, and you have to see how the universities evaluate your application. So it's not just with school activities. You know, we certainly see this across the board and in relationships too. You know?
Well, and I think because we do have parents who have younger kids, self-advocacy should start at that lower level as well, right? So if they're in elementary or middle school, they need to be able to self-advocate, which goes hand in hand with what Erin was saying about have them go talk to the coach, have them go talk to their teacher, and if they don't get, you know, an appropriate response, that's when you step in as their advocate as well. But right now, you teach them how to do that for themselves. And that's kind of what we do in our office anyway, is teach that self-advocacy part. Mm-hmm. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So Amy and I wanted to pull some different resources this morning. And this one just really resonated with us because it shows the kind of growth and development of parents and children alongside one another, and how you work with your children, I guess, and how you parent changes.
And
I
how it
guess.
helps them figure out how they need to fail properly, right?
Yeah.
And then they can come back from that, their resilience.
So it's just a short 2-minute clip.
When a child is learning to walk, that's the last time we allow ourselves to be overjoyed by the fact that they're trying and failing and trying again. Of course, it's hard to see them fall, but somehow we know that this is an essential task for them to practice, 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 and ultimately perfect. Well, somehow we've forgotten that every single other skill in life is acquired the same way. While I was Dean of Freshmen at Stanford University, we began referring to college students as kids or children, and those terms would have not been used in prior decades. Too many students seemed to be lacking agency in their own lives, and I thought, this is not good for them, and it's not good for all of us at a societal level either. Initially, helicopter parenting appears to work. As a kid, you're kept safe. You're given direction. You might get a better grade because that parent is arguing with the teacher. But we parents, we end up getting in our kids' way. We deprive the kid of the chance to show up in their own lives, take responsibility for things, be accountable for outcomes. What we've got to do is teach our kids all of these things, whether it's cross the street or make a meal on the stove or remember to put your belongings in your backpack. There's a 4-step method for teaching kids skills. Step 1, you do it for them. Step 2, you do it with them. Step 3, you watch them do it. Step 4, they can do it independently. If we don't do this, we will have among us a young adult population that doesn't know how to #adult. It becomes a community problem. It becomes a crisis in leadership. You have to ask, well, who's going to run the schools? Who's going to run our nonprofits? Who's going to run the government? Who's going to lead our families? Kids have to be able to make their own mistakes growing up. Life is about having confidence that if you took the wrong path, you can get on the right path. That if you fall down, you can get back up. You know, the moment they learn to walk, they're walking away from us. And it feels terrifying. But as paradoxical as it may sound, our job as parents is, like it or not, to put ourselves out of a job.
Couple of questions we'd love for you to talk about again at your tables. So what resonates with you, from watching the video? Where do you fall in the 4-step process when supporting your child? So think about some things that you have going on in your house right now, whether or not it's getting them ready in the morning for school or driving them around. Think about activities they're doing. Where are you with that? What do you do well as a parent? Because you may remember at the start of this discussion this morning, I mentioned that this is not a critique of parenting styles. So we do also want to celebrate a lot of the things that you're doing right, and we know that we have a lot of fantastic parents within our ASD community that we can learn from. And what might you change about your parenting style, if anything?
Well, and remember, this is about how would you change your parenting style to help your child fail well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so we'll give you 2 minutes and then we'll bring us back together again. Why don't we start with the first talking point? Was there anything that resonated with you from watching the video? Anything that stood out? Maybe like to share? Amanda?
I thought it was just really sad. When they said as soon as they walk, they're walking away from you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my heart.
Yeah, I was saying to Amy, that was the part that just got me too, but it's so true, so it makes you think about it in a different way. Sean?
So my daughter's 15 months old. Like this summer, she was learning to walk, right? So part of it was she was making a lot of progress, and I was pretty good with her falling down once I realized she was going to fall straight down and not fall back into her head. And then we were back with my wife and her mother, and they're Chinese, and so they're like, very much like, so I had kept from them the fact that she was taking steps because I wanted them to experience it because I'd taken her back to China. And then, what was happening was grandma and her mom were leading her everywhere. And after like a week and a half, I'm like, look, you need to stop doing this because she's about to walk and now she'll only walk if one of you leads her around. But if you stop doing that, she will start walking. And 3 days later, when they stopped doing that, she started walking. And they're like, oh, it's so amazing. I'm like, yeah. And I realized I should have told them from the get-go, like, she's pretty much stepping already. You just need to give her room.
Yeah.
And so that feels very much like this at that level.
Yeah. Anything else that resonated with you? Video?
So this morning I had an incident where my middle schooler, they have tryouts these days.
Yeah.
So yesterday was his first tryout, he packed everything, and then this morning we were in the car already by the school, and I'm like, did you get your stuff? He said, whoops. So these are the situations where I really don't know what to do. I really want him to try out, but at the same time, he's responsible of his things.
Yeah.
Honestly, I help them. I just send their stuff, which is not a very good thing, but these tryouts come once a year.
Yeah, well, and that's a really good example, actually, of a situation where you don't want your child to miss out on an activity that's really good for their well-being because they, forgot their stuff at home. So I get that. I think, so what would you do differently next time, like leading up to that?
I always remind, which is probably not the best thing, but I just can't leave it like that.
Yeah.
But again, reminding them is guiding them, right?
Yeah.
And eventually, hopefully, you remind them enough that they will be able to remember it themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying to Amy yesterday morning, so I have a high schooler and a middle school student, and my older son was getting ready to leave for MESAC yesterday morning, and he came up to me literally 10 minutes before walking out the door, and he said, Mom, I only have one pair of golf shorts. And he's going for the week. I'm like, okay. So I said, pack your dirty laundry, and when you get to the hotel, you're going to have to deal with it and put them in to get washed. It was just one of those things on the fly where I'm like, I'm not going to scramble to try and fix this for you now. You're 16 years old. You have to, you got to do this, So it's just, I think what gets hard, in terms of the support of our children is they don't, like certainly in our work with teenagers, we notice they don't ever tend to think in the long term. Right? Everything is, what's immediate, what's next, and so that impacts their self-management and their time management, because they never really look ahead. Whereas we do as parents, right? Like we're always thinking about, okay, what's the schedule for the week? You know, what's the calendar on the fridge? What's, you know, yeah.
But I don't blame them as much. They're really busy.
Yes, they are.
When we were
Yeah.
their age,
Yeah.
their age, we weren't as busy as they are.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree, right? And so then it's, how do you still have the understanding to get that, you know, and they get tired. I mean, same thing, you know, like we show up at work sometimes forgetting things that we need, you know? So it's just having those conversations and then thinking about places in your schedule where you can help support, you know? So last night I told my son, my younger son, you know, okay, pack your bag, you got swimming for tomorrow, you know, so he did that last night, right? So it's just those little, little
But
reminders.
I also want to point out that that's when you can say, why are they so busy? Are there going to be times that they don't have to be that busy? And how do I show them that, you know, yes, you might want to do all these things, but maybe it's not the best idea to do all these things. We talk a lot to the seniors about that. You're going to be doing applications in the fall, and you might not be able to play the sport or do the things, all the things you want to do because you have to make that extra time, right? Otherwise, you're going to be overwhelmed and overloaded and feel frazzled and exhausted. So I think taking the opportunity to have those meaningful conversations with your child and say, okay, what can we do so that you actually have breaks and you're not so busy that you forget all these things that you need, right?
Yeah. So I'm curious, I mean, where do you follow the 4-step process, you know, and for parents in here who have children in different age groups, I guess I'd be curious, like, I'd love to hear from you because you have one in each division. Like, not to put you on the spot.
I was thinking about that as well because all my kids are different. And then my middle schooler, I feel very much like a helicopter parent because his ADHD has him everywhere. And he is the one child that, like, give me access to your school email. But for me, I can see it.
Yeah.
And I remind him to check his email, but I actually know if there's something important. So I can make sure he's checking it, do that now, and then he'll come to me. And, but it's, I've noticed, and then the discussion about we remind, and as, you know, just 3 months into the school year, I didn't have to remind him to bring his trumpet today. Like,
So that's good.
He had everything ready. So we get the reminders, and he's already, it's working. But, but I have older kids where I don't have to worry about anything with them. They know their timelines. I remind them, Mom, I already know. I'm like, oh yeah.
You've done your job right.
In different places.
Yeah, it's meeting your child where they're at, and sometimes it just takes longer, you know, and so we just have to be patient. Okay, all right. I think we should move on.
Yeah, we can move on to the... So Erin and I sat and talked about what are some of the things that we see in the counseling office when it comes to students and maybe them not succeeding at certain things. What are some of the behaviors that are coming out? And this is not to scare you. We even talked about this. We were like, should we list all these? Not sure. We don't want to. We don't want you to think, oh my gosh, you have to be on the lookout for all of this. That's
There's a lot
not
of good stuff happening too.
That's not what it's about. But we do see this a lot. Lots of time management issues. Again, they're doing a lot of things, right? They're very busy. They don't sometimes know how to manage that time properly.
Well, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
I think part of this, because we want to make sure there's some positives attached to these as well, is we have a lot of students who, you know, want to do things really well. And that tends to create problems with time management. And I saw a lot of it again this year just with the university applications where, you know, I had a senior literally on November 1st. He hadn't submitted his early application yet, and I said, you got to break up with the application. You got to submit. You know, the deadline is today. You know, and he said, well, but miss, but I just really like looking at it and reading it over and making sure everything looks great.
Perfectionism.
Yeah, that's the perfectionist part. You know, and I said, but you've been finished the application for 3 weeks. Like, you need to submit it. You know, so I think because our students want to do everything so well, they spend too much time on tasks
Yes.
that should really just take
Yeah.
a short period of time.
Yes.
So that's one of the things I just want to mention
Yes.
attached to that.
I would say too, for me, I've been seeing this year a lot of self-criticism and comparing. I don't know if it tends to flow with class to class.
Yeah.
So if the class that your child is in right now, they take that personality and those characteristics and they move along up to the high school with that. And so I think this year a lot of the kids do compare. Well, so-and-so told me they made this on their exam, and why didn't I make that? Or, you know, I'm really dumb because I can't seem to pick up this math problem in class, but everybody else seems to be doing it. And, you know, we have to remind them a lot. This is your journey, not theirs, and you cannot keep comparing yourself to your classmates or your friends. They do things well that maybe you don't, and you do things well that maybe they don't do well at. So it's, you know, it's not going to be the same for everyone. I have also seen a lot this year of maybe a lot of, I don't want to, inappropriate overreactions. Yes, it's not that the reaction does not fit what is going on with the situation, right? So something that we see as something very minute or, you know, something very simple, I'm seeing very large reactions about this. You know, they might say that they went home and they actually threw things and broke things in their house. They might say that they've been screaming a lot or getting into arguments with their family members. And it's really something as simple as, I didn't like the grade, I got a B on this paper. And then they have this huge reaction. So I think for what it's worth, we all need to be modeling these things. How do you react to a setback? And so that's a big one for me. I don't know about Erin and the other counselors if they're seeing that a lot. Self-care is sometimes neglected. We see kids coming in, they haven't slept for maybe days, they don't eat properly, they look disheveled. It's not because they don't have the things they need at home, it's just because it comes in with that perfectionism and the comparing. I need to do better, I need to do more because my friends are getting ahead and I'm behind. And so what goes? Their self-care. They don't relax, they don't work out, they don't eat well, they don't sleep. And so we see a lot of that from time to time, yeah.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on, again, just along the lines of wanting to share resources this morning. We have a really helpful article that connects to a lot of the conversations that we've been having
And you
this
can
morning.
take these with you as well.
And you can take this home. There for you guys. And write on it, take notes on it.
Yeah.
It's yours. So we want to give you a few minutes just to read this and jot down some of your thoughts. And then we do want to come back together and talk about what are some of the key points, again, that really resonated with you from the article. Yeah. What are some things that you would take away that would maybe help you, in your own communication with your kids at home? Is there anything that you disagree with, too? We want to have an open dialogue this morning, so if there's anything
we have a question right now.
That you don't, yeah.
Or a comment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's hard to not do anything at all. I know that is depressing.
No, and that's a great point that you brought up, because doing the research for this discussion, the consensus is if you're doing something, you're doing well, right? If you're doing something for your child, you're doing a good job, right? You can't just let them flounder, of course. So if you're doing helicopter parenting, as they said even in the video, it works to an extent, right? You have to do some of that. You have to do things, or sometimes things won't get done, right? So that is a good point. You can't just let them suffer. You can't just let them flounder. So we agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's come back together. And even if you didn't get through it, that's okay. You are welcome to take these with you. You can finish reading that. But We wanted you to just, and we can maybe just share out instead of just talking to your neighbor. What are some of the key takeaways that you've read from the article, and what are some of the things you agree with and maybe not agree with? If anybody would like to share their thoughts.
I think that we do have to acknowledge there is this culture of like achievement and competition that is so hard to exist within. So, you know, I could see how people might be like, if I don't do this, they're going to be behind. They're not going to have access to this opportunity. And that's a scary thought.
Yeah.
So I just feel like that's a very real thing to think and feel.
Yeah.
But I learned in the article about this idea of trading short-term wins for long-term thriving and just sort of taking that long-term view. And then yes, college is a piece and success is a piece, but the biggest piece is we're raising adults.
Yes,
you know?
independent
adults, and that's just like a good reminder.
Yes.
Yeah, I really like, Rosanna, that you mentioned that, because I think it's also important to recognize and acknowledge that our parents within this community, like, you don't parent in isolation, right? You're around the other parents all the time, and so you hear about what they're doing, what they're saying, different things that they're putting their kids into or having them focus on, you know. So I think that's also a very important part of just, you know, this discussion, and something to think about is, you know, not every parent you're around maybe matches your parenting style, you know, and that's okay. Right? You know, every family is obviously very different. But that is within the school culture. You know, it's been that way at every school we've worked at.
Yes. I mean, we get asked all the
Yeah.
time, should I have my child, get them a tutor? Should I get them an outside consultant? Should I take them to go see someone, a psychiatrist or psychologist? And I like that parents are asking those questions, because I'd rather you ask us and get our opinion on that, because we're here to help with those things, right? So I do appreciate those questions, and we will be very honest with you when you ask those questions. Amanda.
I was just, picking up on what people have said. I think there's a lot of parent shaming.
Yes.
And I think people feel that they're not doing the right thing.
Yes.
We're doing
it's
enough.
Hard because I think with social media as well, everyone projects they've got perfect families. And
Right.
then everyone's lives are really great.
Yeah.
You think, is it just my family that's dysfunctional? But I don't think there's enough honest conversation between people about the struggles that we have as parents.
Yes.
And that actually things aren't always perfect. I mean, they say a good parent, you just need to be good enough.
Right.
You don't have to be perfect.
Right,
And I
right.
don't think there's enough conversation between us and our friends about that.
Yes.
Because it can be very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, that goes along with that whole, anything you're doing is better than not doing, right? You don't have to be perfect as a parent to help your child be more successful and resilient. I would say one of the things that I took away from the article especially was the part that they were talking about, as your children get older and they grow, you go from being like their boss to their consultant, right? So for me, I think that's an amazing, that really stuck out to me, because I do think that that's true. Again, it's the going from being the maybe over-parenting because you have to being that guide in their life. Matt.
Yeah, my name is Matt. I was a helicopter parent.
Reformed.
Yeah, no, I think birth order has a lot to do with it. And my first child, who's my daughter, I can tell you, like, we kept her away from mud and sand, and like, you can see it, and we thought we ruined her, and then eventually she loves the beach and she's all in it. And so the long term really does, children can change. And even if there's a blip on the radar now, that experience has showed me that there is hope. But I agree that it's challenging as parents in a small community when you're constantly surrounded by what is perceived to be high-achieving adults and high-achieving students, and really modeling the fact that it's okay if you don't have perfection. Focus most of those students. Keep the blinders on like you're a horse on the racetrack, because it's your pathway.
Yeah.
And it's easier said than done, but I always go back to the sand pit and how I saved my daughter from dirt. thinking it was the right thing to do, and actually it's terrible.
And what did you do with your son?
Oh, he's completely different. Throw him in the mud pile. He'd go anyway.
Yeah.
One of the things that resonated with me from this article, I don't know if you got there or not, but on page 7, just the last paragraph, where there's the description of the 4 parenting styles. And I thought about this quite a bit, and sometimes I wonder, is there a good combination of all 4, that you can have? And I think that's another important thing to acknowledge, is that you don't just have to be one kind of parent, so depending on the needs of your child, depending on the stage that they're at, you might have to be more authoritarian. If you see that your child is making poor decisions and you're concerned about their overall well-being, then maybe that's the parenting hat you have to put on at that particular time. But if you get a chance, definitely take a look at that. Just the description about authoritarian, permissive, uninvolved parents too. Sometimes we do see that, and I often find if I'm worried about a parent who seems uninvolved, when we finally get to sit down and talk together, sometimes it's just that they don't know what to do, and they need some support and they need some help, and they've been sort of avoiding dealing with whatever's going on, and then the authoritative parents definitely ties more with the lighthouse parenting that we've been talking about. So just some really good points in here. Now, to go back to your point from the beginning, when you were mentioning the line about not doing anything at all, now that you've looked at the article, has that changed your perception of the intention of that quote?
Absolutely, and it also got me to, if you don't mind me asking you a question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the permissive parent and the authoritative? Because I see that it says permissive parents avoid conflict. I set a few boundaries. Is there anything wrong?
I think it's permissive parenting, to me, with how I see it, is the parent is almost like more of a friend.
Yes, that's how I take that
Do
too.
you know what I mean? And so they tend to, there's not a lot of boundaries set.
So there should be more boundaries.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas the lighthouse parent has boundaries and they guide, but they're not ruling their kids like a
Yes.
dictator.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we did want to make sure we left time for questions. So quickly.
We do have we wanted to show another video.
Yeah.
And do we have time?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
But we'll share this, and we'll make sure that we post the slides. And then
Oh,
Amy
it's
and I
gonna come
also
on.
wanted to share some additional resources.
Yes.
Again, you can take a picture of this if you want,
But we will
we'll
we
post
will
it.
share it.
Just some really wonderful books and articles and
yeah.
sites. Child Mind Institute is a
Child
really
Mind Institute is a great
fantastic
resource. If you
but
don't
we'll
go
share
anywhere
all that.
else, go there.
Yeah. We'll share all of that with you. And we want this to continue to be an ongoing conversation, and it's really important, certainly for us as counselors within the school, and our admin team as well, who's here. We want to work together to be able to support your children and help them, like I said, to be happy and thrive.
Yes.
So if you don't have a high school age child, you're welcome to reach out to the counselor that does work with your child. But let's keep in touch, and let's work
Yeah.
together.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Is there anything that we didn't cover that maybe you're wondering about?
Or
No?
comments.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
for
you so
coming.
much. Thank you, guys.